I'm 81 years old, and I'm going to tell you something I've only said out loud a few times. My children drifted away from me, and it was my fault. Not because I hit them, not because I drank, not because I ran off with someone or ruined the family with one big, obvious sin. If I had done something loud and clear, at least everyone could point to it. It was quieter than that. It was a life made of small choices. 1,000 little decisions that all sounded reasonable when I made them. And then one day I looked up and realized I'd become the kind of father you talk about carefully, like he's a weather problem. The kind you love from a distance, if you love him at all. I'm saying this now because I don't have the luxury of pretending time is endless anymore. My hands shake some mornings. My balance isn't what it was. Friends disappear, not in a dramatic way. Just, you hear they're gone, and then you stop seeing their name in your phone. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because I kept thinking here would be a better moment to fix things, and that moment doesn't always arrive. Sometimes it's just too late, and you're left holding your own explanations like they're worth something. These days, the house is too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. I still catch myself listening for things that aren't coming back. A car door outside. Footsteps on the porch. A key in the lock. Even now, some part of me expects my life to return to how it used to be, as if all this distance is temporary and not the shape of the rest of my life. In the mornings, I make coffee for one. Out of habit, I still reach for a second mug sometimes. I don't know why I do that. It's not like anyone's in the next room. My daughter calls on my birthday. Most years. My son sends a message. Short. Polite. Like an appointment reminder. And I tell myself I should be grateful they do even that. But I'm going to be honest with you. When the call ends, the quiet feels worse than it did before. Because for a few minutes I can't hear their voices and remember what it was like when they needed me, when they told me everything, when my presence mattered. And then it's gone again. I wasn't always like this. When I was young, I thought I was doing it right. I married their mother when I was 24. That was the age you married back then, at least in my circle. You got a job, you got a place, you did the respectable thing. We didn't have much. Our first apartment smelled like old cooking oil no matter how much you scrubbed. The hallway light outside our door flickered like it was tired. The neighbors argued through the walls. But we were proud because it was ours. I worked long hours. I told myself I had to. Not because I loved work, but because I was terrified of failing. I grew up with a father who measured a man by whether the bills got paid. That was the bar. Everything else was a luxury. My son was born first. I can still see him in my mind, red and wrinkled and angry at the world, like he'd been cheated by being pulled out into it. I held him and felt something heavy settle in my chest. Responsibility. Love, too, I suppose. But mostly responsibility. My daughter came 4 years later. She was quieter. She would stare at you with these wide eyes like she was trying to understand what kind of person you were going to be. I used to think she was judging me. Now I think she was just paying attention. The thing is, I loved them. I did. I loved them in the way I knew how. I came home tired, and I'd pat their heads. I'd ask about school while loosening my tie. I'd sit at the table and read the newspaper while they did homework. Sometimes I'd help with a math problem if I had the patience. Sometimes I'd snap because I wanted quiet. The end I'd feel bad and buy them something small the next day, like a candy bar or a toy car. It felt normal, and when they were little, it worked. Little kids don't keep score the way older ones do. They want you nearby. They want to show you a drawing. They want you to watch them jump off the bottom step like it's an Olympic event. They forgive quickly. They adjust. I took that for granted. I was proud of being dependable. Proud of being the one who never missed a shift. Proud of being the one who could be counted on at work. People liked me there. They said I was solid, reliable, a man of his word. And I didn't notice what it cost at home, because the cost was paid in coins, not bills. Small moments, not disasters. It was the school play I missed because the boss needs me. It was the Saturday morning my son asked me to come outside and kick a ball around. And I said, not now. I'm reading. And he stood there another second, waiting for me to change my mind. And then he nodded like he understood. It was my daughter sitting on the edge of my chair one evening, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, trying to tell me something about a girl at school who was being cruel to her. And I listened with half my mind, because the television was on, and I'd had a long day, and I kept thinking about work the next morning. I said, "You'll be fine. Just ignore it." And she got quiet. Not angry, just smaller, like she learned something in that moment. I didn't see it as a turning point. It was just a Tuesday. That's what scares me, looking back. The worst parts weren't moments of rage or cruelty. They were moments of absence while I was sitting right there. There were phone calls I didn't return. Not because I didn't care, but because I thought, I'll call later when I have more time. There were dinners where I was physically present but mentally elsewhere. There were weekends where I said yes to overtime because it felt like the responsible thing. And when I did come home with a little extra money, I felt proud, like I'd done something loving. We took vacations occasionally, once every few years. I remember one trip where my son wanted to go fishing early in the morning. I promised him we would. I truly meant it when I said it. But that night, I stayed up late talking with another couple in the cabin next to ours, drinking beer and laughing. The next morning I woke up late, head thick and mouth dry, and he was already outside by the water with a little rod, sitting by himself. He didn't say anything when I came out. He just nodded and kept staring at the line. I remember feeling irritated, like he was being dramatic. I remember thinking, he should understand I'm tired. That thought still makes me ashamed. Not because I got tired. Because I expected a child to carry my adult excuses. I wasn't cruel. That's what I always told myself. I wasn't cruel. I didn't abandon them. But there are different kinds of abandonment. She said, "Please don't be late." Her voice wasn't whining. It was steady, like she was already preparing for disappointment. I told her, "I'll do my best." I didn't make it. I walked in when it was over. People were standing around holding flowers. I saw her in her dress, holding her music folder close to her chest like a shield. She looked at me, and she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked tired. At 15, I said, "I'm here now." She said, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. And the worst part is, the world didn't end that night. We ate dinner. We talked about ordinary things. And I learned the wrong lesson. I learned that you could miss something important and still keep living. That's true, but it's also how you lose people. Later, when they were grown, I kept doing the same thing, just with different details. My son moved out, got a job, married. My daughter moved to another city. They called less, because that's what happens. But I didn't chase the calls. I didn't make it easy. When my son called, and I was in the middle of something, I'd say, "Can I call you back?" And sometimes I didn't. Not on purpose. It just slipped. A day, 2 days. Then it felt awkward. Then I assumed he'd call again if it mattered. When my daughter called, she'd talk a little longer. She'd tell me about work, about her apartment, about what she cooked for dinner. I would listen, but I'd multitask. I'd be sorting mail or half watching the news. I thought it didn't matter. I thought my voice in her ear was enough. Looking back, I can see the exact moment the pattern cemented. It wasn't a single fight. It was a slow agreement we never spoke aloud. They learned I wasn't the person you went to with the soft parts of life. And I learned to accept being on the outside, because it was what I'd trained everyone to expect. Their mother got sick when I was 68. It wasn't sudden, not at first. She started forgetting small things. A name, where she put her glasses. Then bigger things. The stove left on. A bill unpaid. She would laugh it off, but I could see fear behind it. I did what I always did. I handled the practical things. Doctor appointments, paperwork, medications, insurance. I got good at being efficient, but I wasn't good at sitting with her in the quiet and just being with her fear. Sometimes she would reach for my hand at night, and I would hold it, but my mind would still be running through lists. I told myself I was keeping us afloat, and I was. But I was still missing something, even then. The kids came around more during her illness. My daughter would visit and clean the kitchen without being asked. My son would do the yard work. They would sit with their mother and talk softly to her, and she would relax around them in a way I couldn't manage to create. I felt jealous. I didn't admit that to anyone. It's an ugly thing to feel jealous of your own children for being close to their mother. But I did. When she died, it wasn't dramatic. She faded. That's the only word I have. She faded over months until she was more tired than alive, and then one morning she was gone. After the funeral, people brought food. They hugged me. They told me she was a good woman. They said, "You'll be okay." I nodded like a man, like someone who can take it. That night, when the house emptied out, I stood in the kitchen with a plate of food I didn't want and realized I didn't know how to live in a world where she was the bridge between me and our children. She had been doing more than I understood. She had been translating, softening, reminding, filling in the gaps I left. And without her, the gaps were just open air. My daughter called more often after that, but even then, I didn't change fast enough. I'd answer and talk about the weather, about the price of groceries, about my blood pressure. I'd ask about her job, but I didn't ask the questions that matter. I didn't say, "How are you really?" And when she sounded tired, I didn't sit with that. I tried to fix it with practical advice, like a man repairing a leak. My son visited once or twice a year. He was polite, kind, even, but there was a formality to it, like he was fulfilling a duty with decent manners. I didn't blame him, not out loud. I blamed time, distance, busy lives. But if I'm honest, I also blamed them a little in the secret parts of my mind. I thought I worked hard for them. I did what I was supposed to do. That thought kept me warm for a while, like a coat that doesn't really fit but keeps the wind off. Then came the family event that broke whatever was left of my illusion. It was my granddaughter's birthday. She was turning 6. My daughter hosted it at her house. I was invited, of course. The invitation came in a group message with balloons and smiling faces. I put it on the calendar like it was a dentist appointment. Saturday, 2 p.m. I bought a present days in advance. I even wrapped it. I wanted to do it right. When I arrived, the house was already full. Kids running, adults laughing, music playing low in the background, the smell of food. It was a normal, happy scene. Nothing tragic. My daughter opened the door and smiled. She hugged me quickly, a one-arm hug, like you do when you're holding a phone or thinking about the oven. She said, "Hi, Dad. Come in." My son was there too, with his family. He nodded at me. Hey, not cold, just not close. I stood in the entryway for a second, holding the gift bag, looking for where to put my shoes, and I realized something in my bones. I didn't know where anything was in my own child's house. I didn't know where the glasses were kept. I didn't know where they stored the extra chairs. I didn't know the rhythm of their home. And more than that, I didn't know where I belonged in it. People were talking in small groups, sharing stories I wasn't part of. My son and daughter were laughing with their spouses about something that happened last time, and I didn't know what last time they meant. I tried to join in. I made a comment about the weather because that's what men like me do when we don't know how to enter a conversation. Someone nodded. Someone said, "Yeah, it's been strange." Then the conversation kept moving without me. I wandered toward the kitchen, thinking I could be useful. That's always been my way in. If you can't be warm, be helpful. But my daughter already had everything under control. She was moving around with ease, like the house was an extension of her hands. Her friends were helping. Her sister-in-law was cutting cake. They didn't need me to do anything. I stood by the counter and watched. My granddaughter ran past me and didn't stop. She didn't ignore me out of malice. She just didn't think of me first. Why would she? I was a face she saw a few times a year. A man who gave gifts and said hello. She came back later and said, "Hi, Grandpa," like she remembered she should. Then she ran off again. I sat on a chair in the corner, holding a paper cup of coffee that tasted like someone else's brand, and I felt like a guest. Not a grandfather, not a father, a guest. I looked around and saw my own children moving through their lives, and I realized they had built a whole world that didn't have a space shaped like me in it. That's a strange thing to see. It's not that they didn't love me at all. It's that they didn't need me, and they didn't miss me, and they weren't waiting for me. I went to the bathroom at one point and looked at myself in the mirror. An old man with thinning hair, a face that still tries to look composed. I remember gripping the edge of the sink and thinking, this is it. This is what you earned. Not punishment, not revenge, just the natural result. When it was time to sing happy birthday, everyone gathered around the table. I stood at the edge, behind a couple of taller people. I couldn't see her face when she blew out the candles, just the top of her head and the glow of the candles flickering. I didn't push forward. I didn't feel like I had the right. After cake, my daughter was busy with cleanup. My son was packing up his kids. People were saying their goodbyes. There was a moment where I could have said, "Can we talk sometime? Just you and me." There was a moment where I could have asked my son to grab a coffee next week, just the two of us. But I didn't. I waited for someone to notice me standing there and pull me in. No one did. Not because they're bad people, because I've trained them not to. I left early. I said I was tired. My daughter hugged me again, quick and polite, and said, "Drive safe." My son said, "See you." In the car, the silence hit me like a wall. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and just breathed. I remember thinking, I could die tomorrow and their lives would continue in a straight line. They would be sad, yes. They would attend the funeral. They would tell a few stories. They would sort through my things. They would keep the useful items and throw away the rest. And then they would go home, back to the center of their lives, where I am not. That was the turning point for me. Not a dramatic fight, not a slammed door. A child's birthday party where I realized I'd become background. After that, I started noticing all the things that can't be fixed. You can't go back and sit in that auditorium for the recital. You can't go back and wake up early for fishing. You can't go back and turn off the television and listen to your daughter talk about the girl at school like it's the most important thing in the world, because to her, it was. You can't go back and return the call at the right time when the person on the other end was reaching out with a piece of themselves. People talk about second chances like they're lying around everywhere. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the moment passes and the door doesn't slam. It just closes softly. And one day you realize it's shut. I tried after that. I did. I called my son and asked how he was doing. I tried to keep the call going longer than 5 minutes. I asked about his kids by name. I asked about his work. I told him I was proud of him, which is something I should have said more when he was young. There was a pause when I said it. A long one. He said, "Thanks, Dad." And I could hear in his voice that it mattered and also that it was late. I called my daughter and asked if she wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. She said yes. We met at a small place she liked. I sat across from her and realized I didn't know her as an adult. I knew facts, where she worked, what city she lived in, but I didn't know her inner life. I asked questions and tried not to turn her answers into problems to solve. That's hard for someone like me. At one point she looked at me and said, very calmly, "I used to try so hard to get your attention." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement, like she was describing a past job. I felt my throat tighten. I nodded. I said, "I know." And I wanted to say, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," until the word ran out of meaning. But I didn't want to make it about my guilt. So I just sat there and let the silence exist. We've had a few lunches since. It's better, but better isn't the same as healed. There are years missing. There are habits in them, and in me, that don't disappear because you finally see the truth. My son is harder, not because he's cruel, because he learned to live without needing me, and it worked. Men like him don't reopen old rooms unless there's a reason. And maybe there isn't. That's the part that people don't like to hear. Sometimes you don't get the reunion you imagine. Sometimes you don't get to be folded back into the center. Sometimes the best you get is a seat at the edge and the chance to behave differently with the time you have left. If you're listening to this and you still have your people close, I don't have a speech for you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not wise in that way. I only know what it felt like to keep choosing later. I only know how normal it felt at the time. How I told myself I was busy for good reasons. How I thought love could be assumed, like a permanent background condition. I thought if I kept the lights on and the fridge full, the relationship would stay intact by itself. It doesn't. It wears down the way a step wears down when you walk on it for years. You don't notice the change day to day. Then one day you see the dip and realize it didn't happen overnight. I wish I had understood that showing up is not a grand gesture. It's a habit. It's answering the call when you can. It's calling back when you can't. It's sitting down when you'd rather stand and leave. It's letting someone talk when you want to fix. It's being bored sometimes and staying anyway. I wish I had known that my children weren't going to stay children long. That the window where they reach for you without hesitation is smaller than you think. It closes quietly and you don't get a notification. And I wish I had understood that being needed is not guaranteed. It's a season. If you miss it, you might spend the rest of your life trying to visit a country that no longer exists. If this meant something to you, if it touched a nerve, you can say so in whatever way feels natural. Not because I need it, just because it's strange to carry these truths alone, and maybe you won't have to. As for me, I'm here in this quiet house, with my 1 cup of coffee, trying to be braver than I was when it mattered most. Some days I look at my phone and think about calling my daughter just to tell her I saw something that reminded me of her as a little girl. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes I still hesitate, like an old fool, worried about being a bother. And then I remember what it felt like to sit in that corner at the birthday party, holding a cup of coffee I didn't want, watching life happen without me. So I press the button. Not every time, but more than I used to. That's what my life is now. Not a big redemption. Not a movie ending. Just an old man trying, in small ways, to stop making the same small mistake. I don't know how much time I have left. Nobody does, really, but at 81 you stop pretending it's endless. You start counting in a quieter way. I won't get back what I lost. I can't. I can only be honest about how it happened. It happened because I was always a little too busy, a little too tired, a little too sure there would be more time. And now, when the phone is silent and the house is still, I finally understand what those small choices cost. It cost me being known. It cost me being missed. And if you've never felt that kind of quiet, I hope you never do.